you've suddenly changed, and you're there. And now you are with other people. You're not alone. It's been a fantastic time for her.
Soon, the German anarchist Johann Most entered Goldman's life. Most would become her mentor and her idol.
Most seems to have been a brilliant orator, sarcastic, biting, funny, witty, vicious use of language. The reptile brood, extirpate the reptile brood, he'd say about the middle class and the upper class. And Emma says of him that he stirred her very soul when she heard him speak.
An advocate of insurrection and revolutionary violence, Johann Most had a large and devoted following within the American anarchist movement. As a group, American anarchists were idealistic, articulate, and organized. Though few in number, they had surprising influence.
It was an enormously powerful, well-directed movement. They talked about equality of everyone, regardless of race and sex. They talked about the free production of goods on a cooperative, associative level. They talked about getting rid of the state. And they also talked about the need for education, equal education regardless of who you were. They were astonishing claims in 1883.
In 1886, the anarchist movement captured headlines around the country. Falsely accused of a bombing in Chicago's Haymarket Square, 4 men, all anarchists, were put to death. Their trial and execution became a rallying point for firebrands like Johann Most and galvanized a new generation of radicals.
Emma Goldman is baptized by violence, so to speak, or at least that's the way she sees her career as an anarchist. She becomes an anarchist after the 5 Haymarket martyrs are executed. And she feels great affinity with these 5 men. She later on in life calls them parents, intellectual parents.
For Goldman, it must have seemed that, and for Berkman, it must have seemed that they finally had their founding stone. It was the place where they took their oath.
Very quickly, she found her own voice and found that people responded to her because she spoke with such great conviction.
I think on stage she was possessed. From what I've read about her performances, I think of her as a speaker who let herself go and inspired herself. I think she was from the school of, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say next.
At her first speaking engagement, Goldman panicked. Unable to remember her topic, the campaign for the 8-hour day, she spoke instead of her great ideal, anarchism.
I could sway people with words, words that welled up from within me, from some unfamiliar depth.
To Goldman, anarchism combined an optimistic faith in human nature with an intense distrust of authority. She defined anarchism as a new social order based on liberty and unrestricted by man-made law. In this anarchist world, government would be replaced by a spirit of free cooperation. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs.
That, I think, we have to accept was Goldman's bedrock belief when she moves into anarchism. That's the tradition that she's drawing on. So you've got this ideal, which is the most extreme of all. You can't vote in anarchism. You know, you can't get coalitions with various other groups to get anarchism. Anarchism is the most extreme of all. And therefore, how that balances with the needs and the feelings and the routines of everyday life was a huge problem for American anarchists and anarchists worldwide. Well, how can I deal with the fact that I haven't got any rent? That's a huge gap.
Anarchism as a political philosophy is almost jaw-droppingly naive. Freedom is a good inclination. Suspicion of state power is a good inclination. The question is, how is that to translate into practical politics?
I think she was a serious political theorist who actually thought through an anarchist movement you could create this kind of self-governing world. Anarchism is sort of the noblest of all dreams. It seems to me in some ways it's almost a profoundly Christian dream, though people never talk about it that way.
Well, why do people stick with their God? It's what they have. That was her God, that revolutionary ideal. She's a very religious woman, if you think about it.
But Goldman also believed that to create a more perfect society, acts of political violence were occasionally justified. A belief shared by her friend and lover, Alexander Berkman. Violence would soon begin to dog her every step. June 1892. A strike at the Andrew Carnegie-owned steel plant in Homestead, Pennsylvania, escalated into one of the bloodiest labor battles the country had seen. The Homestead strike came during a period of intense unrest. Thousands of men and women fought for the right to strike, to form unions, and to establish a 40-hour work week. They were met with force from police, from soldiers, and from the hired armed guards of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. On June 25th, workers called a strike. Henry Clay Frick, plant manager, closed the mill and locked them out. Then he called in the Pinkertons. 2 weeks later, in the middle of the night, 300 Pinkertons crammed onto barges and were towed 10 miles up the Monongahela River to Homestead. Armed workers were waiting on the riverbank. At dawn, a pitched battle broke out. "12 hours later, 3 Pinkertons and 7 strikers lay dead.
To us, it sounded like the awakening of the American worker. The long-awaited day of resurrection.
In Alexander Berkman, it stirred something deeper. It was the moment for what anarchists called propaganda by the deed, a political assassination. His target, Henry Clay Frick.
Emma and Sasha and their friends live in virtual reality. There's therefore a sort of an element of folly in their attempt to solve this country's problems by going to Pennsylvania and getting rid of these industrialists